I'm home.
Throws to the near side, and that's intercepted. Intercepted by Jack Jones, heading down the near sideline, and this will be a pick six for Jack Jones and a touchdown for Arizona State.
People here, when you think of Sun Devil football, you think of Sun Devil for life.
Here we go, 7 seconds. Berkovici. He's just going to air it out deep downfield, and no white shirts around. Oh, Jalen Strong! Caught for a touchdown! Jalen Strong makes the catch!
I went to Arizona State. Right. I'm a Sun Devil, man.
This is about the Valley. We need the Valley. If we get the Valley all in, the sky is the limit.
Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
I'm Joe Healy with DevilsDigest.com.
Joe, last week was a big week for the marquee Sun Devil sports. ASU football got onto the practice field for the first time under head coach Kenny Dillingham. A lot of energy, a lot of cool stuff that we will be diving into and recapping here in just a little bit. On the hardwood, the basketball team made the NCAA Tournament, won a big game in Dayton, but it wouldn't be Sun Devil sports without a dagger to the heart.
Yeah, the Kenny Dillingham era is off and running, and we're seeing what it's all about, getting some glimpses of it, and I'm sure a lot of folks are really enjoying to turn the page to something positive. We're seeing a lot of energy coming out of camp, and no shortage of news bits on the basketball front. It's almost like the end of the season at this point, though it was just, 3 days ago or so, 3-4 days ago. That almost seems like it's very far in the rear view because of what the headline of potential concern is right now.
Yeah, there's a lot that we'll be diving into, and a little bit later on, no better guy to break it all down with us than Hod Rabino, publisher of DevilsDigest.com. Get his thoughts on what he saw out there on the practice field with the Son of a Football squad, and also the basketball team in the future and the possible end of an era with Coach Hurley in Tempe. We will see. We'll discuss it all here later on. And also stay tuned later on at the end of the episode as I'll bring you a conversation that we at practice had. First time that the media was allowed to talk to blue chip quarterback Jaden Rashada following ASU's Saturday practice. A lot of good things that he had to say. I asked him about how good it was to focus on football finally, and it's some good comments that he made about kind of being the son of a legacy and what it meant to be out there in the maroon and gold. But before we dive into all that, Joe, a couple of news items from other sports that have been doing pretty good and have some positive showings. It wasn't just the basketball team that wrapped up their season. ASU's wrestling squad under Zeke Jones finished their campaign in a pretty notable way.
Yeah, they had the NCAA tournament for wrestling this past weekend. Obviously very different from like basketball that goes on for weeks at a time. It's just a 3-day deal. It is chaos, and it is awesome. I'm telling you, if you've never watched any NCAA tournament wrestling action, check it out when it comes back around next year. It's really, really exciting, incredible stuff. And the Devils had an awesome showing, and they put the final stamp on what has been a challenging season and did so in positive fashion. As you may be aware, ASU just flat out had a disappointing showing at the Pac-12 tournament a couple weeks ago. And that, led to some concerns naturally that NCAA's, may not be quite up to par the par that has been set the last few years, with the Sun Devils finishing 4th in the nation at NCAA's both last year and the year before. So you fast forward, get to the state of Oklahoma where the NCAA tournament was held this year, and the Sun Devils did just about as good as you could have expected them, if not better. All things considered, they sent 5 wrestlers to NCAA action, and that was a few less than we'd seen in previous years. And in this game, it's really largely about how many guys you send and how much the winning they do. So a relatively light load. especially considering the fact that Kyle Valencia for ASU lost his first two matches that he had and was eliminated. So the bulk of the action was done by 4 guys, but there are 4 guys you can go to war with. Brandon Courtney, Mikkel McGee, Kyle Parko, Colton Schultz, all 4 earning All-America honors. And for those who aren't familiar, how it works in college wrestling is if you place anywhere within the top 8 at your weight class, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever it may be, you are an All-American. So that's what it takes to get to that level. So those 4 earn that for ASU, many of which doing it at a pretty high level. Brandon Courtney and Mikkel McGee finished 3rd in the country at the 125 and 133-pound weight class, respectively. Kyle Parko finished 4th. Colton Schultz finished 7th. So maybe some of those numbers, especially Schultz, a lot of folks probably would have expected him to finish higher, especially since he carried a number 1 ranking for a good chunk of the early part of the season. Brandon Courtney came in, I believe, at the 10th seed at the 125 division, so though he's a highly accomplished veteran wrestler, for him to finish 3rd, that's a great way for him to end his career. Both he and Mikkel McGee had their final matches as collegiate athletes, as Sun Devils, and they went out with their hand raised. Something special about that for that to be the case. So all in all, after it was all said and done, ASU finished 7th in the country at NCAAs, which, again, in the preseason, before the injuries hit, other personnel issues, ASU was expected, maybe at worst, to yet again finish in the top 4. So maybe 7th at that point in the summertime. Looking ahead toward things might look like a little bit of a disappointment, but when you really iron it all out, see how the season transpired, understand the injury issues that ASU dealt with over the course of the season and in the Pac-12 tournament, doing what they did at NCAAs, remarkable performance by the wrestlers and the entire coaching staff, of course, led by our guy Zeke Jones. So what you've got here is 3 consecutive years. If you're a stat guy like me and want to identify the trends of things, 3 consecutive years with top 8 finishes at NCAAs for ASU wrestling. It's the first time they've had a 3-year streak of that nature in about 30 years, since the early to mid 90s. So again, for all the Sun Devil fans who are just living and dying on the words of Ray Anderson and top 15 programs and this and that, Sun Devil wrestling is that. They are beyond that. They have consistently been that for the last few years, doing it when it counts at the NCAA stage. And this is a team that has a few seniors, but they got a lot of young guys coming up, a lot of returning contributors for next year. So though this was a very solid finish this year, there's still a lot of talent that should be coming back. Transfer portal obviously exists in college wrestling as well, so it's a good time to get excited or stay excited about this wrestling program. But once again, all in all, hats off to Zeke Jones and the entire wrestling program, coaches, staff, and athletes for what really has to be considered a pretty sweet NCAA finish after what was a pretty frustrating and tumultuous year for that program, no doubt.
Baseball team continues its kind of streaky start to the season. Of course, after coming off a 5-game losing streak, the Devils went out there and won 6 straight before a late-game pitching collapse cost them Sunday's game against Utah, dropping them to 12-8 overall on the year. Now, due to some weather, the Tuesday game against Grand Canyon pushed to Wednesday. And then, of course, this weekend, the Wildcats are coming to Phoenix Muni. Folks, get out there, support your Devils as they take on the Wildcats. But on a more positive note, one of the guys helping power the Sun Devils to that 6-game win streak, Luke Keeschel, was named the Pac-12 Player of the Week. In 4 games, he hit .625, slugged over 1,300, cranked 3 home runs, drove in 11, and swiped a couple of bases as well. Joe, I know you're always keeping close tabs on the baseball team. What have you been seeing lately from a guy like Luke, and also just kind of the streaky nature of this early season for the Devils now that they're getting kind of into the meat of Pac-12 play?
Yeah, I think that this week is really going to define a lot about this team because, as you mentioned, there have been ups and downs here in just barely over a month of the season. We've seen win streaks, losing streaks. We've seen the pitching be on fire. We've seen it be ice cold. Keeschel comes in. He of all the transfers that came to ASU this offseason, especially in the position players, he's the one that came in with the highest expectations, and overall, he's one of the top couple in terms of that class. So what he's doing here and these accolades and these performances, this is the kind of stuff that generally was expected of him. He was supposed to be a leader and a key contributor, so you've got that, and it's good when that comes to fruition. So when you have the, Grand Canyon, although of course they lost their head coach Stankwich to USC, so they're operating a little bit differently than they had in the past. They've got some talent. One of their infielders, I think, is universally expected to be a top 10 pick in the draft. Arizona, again, they're not quite what they were a couple years ago, but still a formidable opponent and still in a position where that's a program that ASU needs to overcome to, rise up the ranks in the conference. So no shortage of motivation, incentive, competition, because I think, especially on, baseball, ASU and Grand Canyon have played for years. I mean, think about basketball, how that was kind of a big deal when they met for the first time a couple years ago. And then again here, I believe it was the year before last, whatever it may have been. Baseball, they've been playing for a long time, so it's almost got a little bit of a rivalry to it, and their baseball program is pretty good at GCU. So, it's something where that's taken seriously in any context. So, once again, it's good to get on the winning side of things. It would have been real nice to be able to close out a sweep at Utah last week, with some pitching issues still poking their head that, as the year goes on, things separate from being, early season issues that you're still tinkering with and can improve, and then before long, it becomes a point where it's, okay, that's simply just an issue. That's a problem. The pitching, it's not very encouraging right now, but we've also seen it be very good. So not quite going to write it off quite yet, but obviously, again, the nature of the teams that they're going to be playing over this next week really going to show a lot if we can see some of the pitching buckle down and the bats come alive as well. Because if you can, win the series, if you can go at least 3-1 over these 4 games, I know that's a pretty lofty expectation, but if you can do that, that's going to be something good. Now, if you fall well short of that, and any outcome is possible, like I said, where we are a week from now, I think is really going to determine quite a bit as far as what we might expect for the remainder of the season from this program.
All right, so before we dive into ASU spring football, should put a bow, at least for right now, because some things might still be in play here in the coming days and weeks ahead. On the Sunnyvale basketball team, Bobby Hurley's squad, of course, has had a fast start to the season, had some struggles there, and had really kind of had to rally late to get their way into the NCAA tournament, which they did, and put on a great show in Dayton, taking care of Nevada 98-73, and then advancing to the round of 64, facing off against TCU. And, we saw a Sun Devil team just kind of like really kind of emblematic of the entire season, and just a team that played some good defense, always was in it, was streaky with their shooting, some self-inflicted errors, and ultimately the Horned Frogs were able to pull away in the last few seconds with a 72-70 victory over the Sun Devils, sending them home and ending the season. But I think overall, if you take a step back and you look at a team that was picked 7th in the Pac-12 preseason poll, that they went out there and won 23 games. They spoiled U of A's senior day, won a couple times in the Pac-12 tournament, got an NCAA tournament win. Overall, for me, relative to the expectations, I thought it was a successful year. I mean, there were so many new pieces on this squad, and with the struggles of the last couple of years, it was kind of a really important, critical year for this program. And I think that, far from perfect, and there's a lot that, if you look back on, you wish had really kind of gone differently. But overall, I think I come away with a sense that this was a successful year. Maybe a good, perhaps not great. Obviously, I mean, this is a team that when their shots are falling and when they're clicking on all cylinders, it probably could have made a run to the Sweet 16 at least. But they go home in the round of 64. But overall, Joe, to me, I feel that this team kind of exceeded my personal expectations. How did that rank with you?
So for ASU sports, I've really kind of wedged myself into a comfort zone of especially in the last few years, of really just kind of taken a historical view when it comes to expectations, because that word expectation is something that creates a lot of interesting dialogue among Sun Devil fans, because without getting too off topic, I think there is a large cluster of this fan base who confuse what they want and what they hope will be the case with what should be expected. Sun Devil basketball is although, it's not at the very top of my list these days, it is the sport at ASU that I've followed the longest, going back to the early 90s. Didn't really jump on with football for ASU till the mid 90s, 96 team. Baseball in the early 90s, but more so, around the late 90s as well. So basketball was kind of there like in the Frieder era. I have seen a lot of terrible teams at ASU. And I was looking through just to kind of look at records, like you might remember something different than it was, but these 10 and 12 or 13, 14 win teams for entire years, there were many of them. I still, for whatever reason, just mentally reside in the world where ASU making the NCAA tournament is damn near on par with the football team making the Rose Bowl, as far as that's how big of a deal it is just to make the tournament. Because that's kind of how things were, within the 10 years or so from after that good season Frieder had in the mid 90s for about, the entire Rob Evans era minus 1 year. I mean, that's the time I was in college. So with that, when ASU has a 20-plus win season, when they beat Arizona, when they have success in the Pac-12 tournament, and they make it to the NCAA tournament, and I don't care who you are, and if you want to bicker about the first four, you're in the tournament. Now, granted, they won their game there, so it's indisputable. I feel like all of those are, quite frankly, remarkable successes. Because once again, I still see this as a program that, whether it's fair or unfair, the program that it was for most of the first handful of years of this century, of one that just was won in maybe 15 games or so. I mean, there was a time period where ASU won one single game against the U of A, I think between like 95, 96 and like Harden's first year here, like a decade or more. So there are times that I've seen that were real bad. And I know a lot of people listening to this have seen those. Now, for younger Sun Devil fans, ones that are maybe, in 10 years or less, they might have different expectations. If their first glimpse of ASU basketball was the James Harden era, and then you had another tournament appearance, 4 or 5 years later under Sendek, and you got the stuff of Bobby Hurley, that sample might give you different thoughts about what is possible here. A lot of people have been clamoring on about making the second round of the NCAA tournament. For whatever reason, that has become the milestone standard bearer that ASU head basketball coaches should be measured by, when that has happened exactly twice here since the end of the 94-95 season. It happened once under Rob Evans, once under Herb Sendek. That's a little lofty ambition. So, again, I know this is a really, really drawn-out way to say this, but a lot of dialogue, a lot of discussion been going on about it. Yeah, it would be wonderful if ASU won the national championship at every single sport, but that's not very realistic. So for an ASU basketball team to win the amount of games it did this year, that's the amount of victories, probably somewhere in the top 5 that ASU's had in the last 35, 40 years. At a minimum, without even looking at the numbers. So, I mean, you got to look at these things objectively. I know that, yes, they left some victories out there, but they also snatched some from defeat. It almost kind of like balances itself out. You had some games that they lost that they shouldn't have. They had some games that they won that maybe you wouldn't have thought they would. It's the same thing that happens with the football program damn near every year. You lose to in Oregon State when they were still a middling team, and you beat Oregon. It's the nature of being a Sun Devil fan. So, to wrap all of that up, I do not understand the thought process of anybody who looks back at this season and doesn't stamp it as an unquestioned success. Again, am I saying it's the greatest season of all time? Of course not. Am I saying that Bobby Hurley should be named National Coach of the Year? Not saying that. But I'm saying if you take a pragmatic and realistic approach to what this basketball program has been over several years, I don't see how you can't be satisfied. Again, satisfied is a good word to describe it. Not elated, not jubilant, not, having a party in the streets about it, but satisfied to where it's like, you know what, that was good. It certainly exceeded my expectations because I never, I guess I could say I very, very rarely enter a ASU basketball season like thinking they're going to go to the NCAA tournament. I'm just too predisposed from following this team through some really tough times that it's like I still can't hardwire my brain to think that is an appropriate expectation for this program, which, was certainly wrong not to have expected entering this year. So we'll see. This is almost becoming like a similar situation to how the football season, in the sense that, okay, it came to a heartbreaking end against your bitter rival, but the news changed like in a heartbeat because there was a different topic to discuss within 24 to 48 hours. That Arizona game, the Territorial Cup loss, like just lasted for a heartbeat and then moved on. So talking about this season and the tournament, et cetera, that's quickly shifting away from the slate of news with some pretty big stuff taking the forefront.
Yeah, we'll see where that leads because kind of on a similar note to how ASU got good news on the coaching front after their football defeat, we'll wait and see what happens, with Coach Hurley's future in Tempe. Now, I agree. I mean, because I kind of, we're basically kind of similar ages, and yeah, just like when ASU got to 20 wins or an NCAA tournament, it was like a wow moment. And now, Bobby Hurley has done some things over his tenure that, obviously is source of frustration for a lot of fans in terms of just kind of the inconsistencies. But generally speaking, that he was getting ASU to be a consistent tournament team. And then, of course, COVID really derailed things, and I think that it took a number of years. And I don't know, like how many programs across the country were hit as hard as ASU was in terms of just the kind of the COVID disruptions over those couple of years.
I mean, it was a 3 years. If you think about, because ASU highly likely would have been just a regular, I don't know terminology. They would have gotten a regular tournament bid outside the first four.
Yeah.
In 1920, 2021, they have a ton of talent, but they have an excess amount of games, canceled a bunch of issues, and that impacted that. And they still had cancellation issues the following season. So this really severely impacted 3 basketball seasons for ASU. And again, I'm not going to say, ASU is the largest victim of the pandemic or anything foolish like that. But like you said, I mean, even if that 1920 season had been able to play out into the NCAA tournament, this program would be different shape because you'd have another NCAA appearance and maybe they would have made some noise.
Yeah, and so that I think has left a lot of fans, with those elevated expectations, and then with the few years of just trying to dig out of that hole, and that led to a lot of frustrations. And if you saw, the level of talent, you see the Marcus Bagley and the Josh Christopher coming in, those 5-star recruits, and basically combining to do a whole lot of not much. Bagley specifically. I believe 27 games in 3 total seasons, maybe a couple this year. But so this has been a program that I thought this year was a real kind of inflection point for if Hurley can get back to that trajectory, and lo and behold, 23 wins, tournament appearance, tournament win. It seems like that, the foot is in the right direction. Now, obviously, there's a whole lot of things going on behind the scenes in terms of the relationship with the AD and perhaps other jobs back east that might be appealing to Coach Hurley. Maybe he just wants to leave some of that drama in the desert behind. We will see, but I think that should he stick around, and I think he should. I mean, he's the right man for the job, and that kind of leads to another question that a lot of folks that the vocal people that are been very critical of Hurley and think that the program should move on. Who can ASU realistically get in seat that would be better, kind of given the situation, with the situation at the athletic director spot? Who can they realistically bring in here that would do a better job?
And how much public confidence would there be that the prime candidates out there would be ones that this administration could do what's necessary to lock up.
Exactly.
That's why I don't. This is going to sound bad, but ASU basketball to me is like there's a certain cruising altitude for this program that I'm perfectly okay with, and that's pretty much what Bobby Hurley has it at now. If you're telling me that, okay, if we're going to define a few reliable elements of Bobby Hurley at ASU, he's going to schedule very difficult teams in non-conference, so you'll get some marquee games either to watch on TV, to go see on the road, or to see at home. He's going to have some success with those. He's going to, over the course of a season, he's going to beat a couple teams that he probably shouldn't, at least on paper. Going to lose about an equal amount that you shouldn't on paper. But at the end of the day, they'll be squarely in the conversation of one side of the bubble or the other. For me personally, for ASU basketball, that's something that I would let that go on autopilot for a while. Again, because I was raised with an ASU basketball program that minus 2 seasons, for a solid 10 to 15 years of the time I was paying attention from the 90s prior to the arrival of James Harden, again, not even really competitive in a lot of seasons. So if you're telling me this team is legitimately in the conversation to be a tournament team every year, which is where Bobby Hurley has it, to me that's pretty good. I think that maybe I'm just too aiming low. Maybe I'm more realistic than people like to be. Maybe there's a chunk of the fan base that just doesn't happen to be of a certain age like me and have followed this team for 30 years. I know that obviously a lot of folks have followed for way longer, but maybe there are a lot of people that are, again, from the last 10 to 15 years to where in that scope they've seen some dang good things and some high draft picks and some, good teams in tournament appearances to where they think that that's more common than it truly is for this program, and so it should be natural to evolve past that. But, like I said, yeah, it's just something that I don't know where the confidence comes from that ASU would, hire the hot up-and-coming coach and if not that they would find some adequate replacement for those who are maybe disgruntled with Bobby Hurley. And again, I'm not saying it's perfect. I certainly acknowledge that there are X's and O's coaching things to be desired. There's consistency to be desired. But again, the basketball program at ASU doesn't have a lot of history to speak of when it comes to expectations. If you have a team, well, again, I've said it multiple times, but if this is a team that is going to compete for tournament appearances and you're making tournament appearances like every other year or 2 out of 3 years, which is, again, kind of where things are right now, that is remarkable compared to the past. So for me, I'm all right with that.
I think if you can get ASU to be a consistent 20-win team, that gets you in the tournament conversation each and every year, and that's generally speaking in a non-pandemic times where ASU has been. You mentioned, of course, some of the obvious shortcomings, like on the offensive side of the ball. I know there's been talk for a number of years of like bringing in a quote-unquote offensive coordinator, because the system plays fast and loose, and when they're hitting shots, it's great. But a lot of times they're not. And, the number of years now in which their shooting percentages, especially from deep, have suffered, legitimate concern. But there's no doubting that this is a team and that he is able to get the guys to play hard for him, and he can bring in quality talent. I mean, ASU's has assigned Braylon Green, a guard in this class, a 4-star guy coming in from California, adding to that mix. And so we'll see obviously a couple key departures that are exhausted their eligibility, but if Hurley stays, then you got to figure some of those key cogs are going to stick around to add to that core, and we've seen the magic that he's been able to work through the transfer portal. If he doesn't stay, then you don't know where you're going to go, and then you're going to have to look at another rebuild. maybe perhaps the football equivalent of what Kenny Dillingham had to do in terms of just basically overhauling, a huge chunk of the roster. But
yeah, I mean, if he's gone, and I'm not saying he's wouldn't reincarnate or something like that, but you're probably going to lose a few returning starters. That's been discussed. The opportunity for the couple signees who are both at or near the 4-star level, if a coaching change, it's my understanding that lets people out of their NLI. That wouldn't shock me if they go elsewhere. You'd be talking about a major overhaul of the roster. And again, I think that folks assume that, hey, well, Bobby Hurley's gotten all these really good starters, the DJ Horns, the Marion Jacksons, the Des Cambridges, the Warren Washingtons, it's a transfer machine. It's like, no, that's because Bobby Hurley can recruit and he's got a hell of a lot of name recognition. Not everybody has that. So, yeah, somebody could come in and do better. Someone could come in and do the same. Someone could come in and do worse with a depleted roster. And it could be really tough. And the people who haven't experienced those 12 to 15 win ASU basketball seasons might experience that. Again, I know that makes it sound like it's a sky is falling situation if Bobby Hurley happens to leave. If he leaves on his own accord, then I can't fault him because just the level of support programmatically is not there. If ASU opts not to bring him back or just doesn't give him, again, what if the opportunity is there for him to return, but ASU doesn't do what's necessary, doesn't step up to the plate, I think that'd be a tremendous mistake. Now, does that mean I think Bob Hurley's going to be here for 10, 20 years? Who's to say? But I think he's more than earned the right to be around for at least a couple more.
Absolutely. And again, if it's his choice, obviously, since he, I think, took the job, the rumors of he's going to return back east at some point to take a job, and obviously a Jersey kid, guy back there with all the East Coast ties. It might just be a matter of when, not if, but some of the jobs, I believe St. John's was just filled today with Rick Pitino, but of course Providence is open. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think ASU, or hopefully ASU, should realize the value they have in there. And, there's 1 year left on Hurley's deal. Obviously in these days in coaching, you don't want to have a coach who just kind of just that 1 year. Doesn't really kind of work like that for a number of reasons. So hopefully they can come to an extension, see the value, and then if ASU is able to continue the momentum, building off of the success of this year, get into the tournament, and perhaps you start to see what we saw a couple years ago where they were able to kind of stack those tournament quality seasons back on top of each other, and it wasn't an aberration. But it's a complicated, very fluid situation. It's got a lot of people talking, a lot of folks out there on the rumor mill. We'll see what happens, and we'll obviously stay pretty close on top of things. As this is a program that obviously a lot of people have loved for a long time, like you, Joe. Some people have really jumped on board. I mean, they just a few years ago, they were taking the tarps off and the curtains off of the upper deck at Desert Financial because just the interest was there and the atmosphere there has really kind of grown over Bobby Hurley's tenure of just.
And I think like Phoenix is like a basketball town. You know what I mean? Like when the Suns are rolling, like they get more popular than when the Cardinals are rolling, the D-backs, Scouties, that sort of thing.
Without question.
It doesn't take a ton for, when ASU basketball has gone through its hot streaks, it takes less to get folks on board and in the house than it does for football, which really needs to typically, build that up. So the path to popularity is not as difficult or long as it may be for other sports.
Yeah, so we will see what happens here in the next couple days. Should be an eventful week or two. We'll definitely stay on top of things, and we'll also be staying on top of the football team and a more drama-free scenarios out there at the Kajikawa practice fields. ASU completed their first week. They are practicing every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for the next few weeks, culminating, of course, in April 15th's spring game. And, I've been covering this program and practices since the first Todd Graham year. And each program has had a different feel, and a lot has been made, when Todd Graham took over that, there was a lot of, drill sergeant energy and just kind of after the end of the Erickson tenure. But I have not been around a practices that have really had the combination of vibe, of energy, of competitiveness that we've seen through the first three under Kenny Dillingham. Just the energy's been fantastic, and it kind of had a little Todd Graham feel, like right after early in the first practice, after the stretch, and he brought them all together, and then they broke to go to their individual periods. He had them go back 3 different times because he didn't like the way they broke and sprinted off to the respective stations. So a little Todd Graham there, but at the same point, there's a lot of competitiveness, but also a lot of fun. Kenny Dillingham has stressed that when he thinks players are engaged, when they're having fun, he even brought in some science saying when the dopamine's going, because they have music playing throughout the practices, that's more conducive to learning. And he's he said after the first practice that he's teaching them the language so they can be taught football, because he's kind of breaking things down and starting from the ground up. He's basically kind of almost like an MC at these practices. He's got a mic. He's screaming instructions at various times. He's, whether it's sometimes just times things that are perhaps more motivational, sometimes are more to get the guys going, or more instructional. One thing that really kind of caught a lot of folks' attention is during the about halfway through the first practice, he got on the PA and and said that, "Hey guys, I love it. If you're going to be talking shit, make sure you win the rep. No, you should not be talking if you lose the rep." And just like you would not, I turned to somebody, another writer, and was like, "There's no way. Like, can you imagine Herm Edwards getting off in the middle of practice and saying that?" And it's just something that really has so far resonated with this team. There's like fun music cues. Like sometimes they'll play Queens Under Pressure at various points, and no matter where the special team, the field goal unit is on either of the 2 practice fields, they have to run over to the first field and get in position to kick a last-second field goal. And for the most part, Dario Longetto's looked pretty good. He's been pretty accurate. But it's just stuff like that, and just the atmosphere of competition and the competitiveness has been outstanding. They have what they call the main events. So about twice every practice so far, everybody, the whole team converges on one field. And based on what Kenny has seen through the first part of the practice, he'll orchestrate one-on-one matchups. Like in one case, it was Jordan Clark and Jalen Conyers and for a coverage rep. Or sometimes it's linemen going up against each other. And this past Saturday, after some good-natured Twitter bantering between between Kenny and some of the players, they actually wheeled out a basketball hoop onto the practice field. And the first one was Conyers and Chris Edmonds. They're going back and forth about who's the best hooper on the team, and they took shots. But both of them missed, but I'll give them a pass. They were in shoulder pads. But then it also got involved with like Coach Regal and Coach Baldwin going at it. You could just sense that this is a totally new era, and it's just great to see that just kind of after the darkness of last season, that there's such new life and renewed vigor with Sun Devil football.
Yeah, things have really, the page has been turned in a very distinct way. I just saw just a random video that the program put together. It was very well done. There was a cool thing about, just talking to players and coaches who do you want to be stuck in an elevator with. And they're just kind of joking about it. Again, it has nothing to do with football or sports or anything like that, but you're just seeing people that are enjoying what they're doing, and the body language and the facial expressions, and the fact that, again, they're enjoying it, and there's nothing wrong with that. I know there might be kind of some old fuddy-duddy types that see this stuff and think, oh, they're just screwing around and they screw around too much, and that's not going to win games, et cetera, et cetera. But especially for a lot of these players and what they've had to go through to no fault of their own through this NCAA investigation and all of just the numerous elements of fallout that have occurred, it's good for them to be able to unwind. And they're obviously out there working. And it's a very early return, but this kind of stuff to me, really seems like you have that dynamic that you want, where it's kind of that player's coach, that relatable young guy, but someone that isn't afraid to, discipline where necessary. You don't have people that are terribly hands-off, the proverbial player's coach like a Dennis Erickson. You don't have the, real, authoritative style of a Todd Graham. You don't have the CEO kind of somewhat removed like a Herm Edwards. I mean, this seems like it's the best of all the worlds. And it's not just what we're seeing in the spring. You know, you've seen these clips online at, you know, Dillingham playing chess with people, or this card trick. I think it was with Chris Edmonds, right? That still blows my freaking mind, and it feels like it's staged. I don't know where it was. It was maybe, I mean, it was before spring camp, so it was maybe about a month ago, maybe less. But it was just one of those deals where it's like, you know, I think it was Edmonds. Like, you know, he had a card, and Kenny's like judging. He's asking things, and he's judging his facial expressions. Like, oh, okay, well, you blinked when I said that one, so it's got to be that. Like, it's just this stuff that you'd think like a, you know, a detective, like detective training type of stuff, where you're, you know, judging a guy's facial cues to see what's right and wrong. But these kind of things where it's like he's just being competitive and having fun. Like I said, you see him playing chess with guys or doing these kind of tricks where, you know, he's engaging with his players. It's a competitive thing because he's kind of showing them up in these cases, which is fine.
There's been plenty of times where like there's like good-natured banter during practice about just like, because he's not afraid to talk some smack to his players, and they give it right back. But you can tell that it's completely like with tone of respect and just like the air of competitiveness that he tries to foster on the practice field, in the meeting, everywhere in that program. Competitiveness thrives.
Yeah, and that's something for me that I like. I mean, that's something that, like, you know, people think different things of a guy like maybe like a Lane Kiffin, and he has a lot of fun out there, but you know what? He still wins some ball games too, and has had some success in the recent years of his career. I think that's something that, you know, ASU's got to be unique in what they're doing, and that works. Now, obviously, until the lights go on, he's still undefeated, right? Until he loses a game. And you can't lose a game until you play one, so there are a lot of good ways to look at things, and if ASU were to, you know, get off to a slow start, folks might track back to this and say, oh, they shouldn't have been screwing around and having fun. They should have been really buckling down in practice, but whatever. I don't see it that way, at least not for the immediate time being. It's a good thing to get guys having fun, because it just, I mean, last year was not fun at all, with the exception of like 3 hours on an October afternoon against Washington. And then the previous year, you know, had some fun, but there was a cloud over it. It's been, you know, nearly a 2-year cloud that just hasn't, all things considered, been that great. So to be able to turn the page like they have, to where the things of last season seem very far in the rear view mirror, it's a great place to start if we're talking about just stuff really outside the X's and O's and the, you know, the practicing itself. How it's structured, what they're doing, the energy, something that you got to be happy with so far.
Yeah, and to those fuddy-duddies who might have a fear that, you know, there might be, you know, not a whole lot of work getting done. Like I've been out there to every practice, and I'm going to be out there covering all the other practices. These guys are working hard. I mean, these are players who have gone through an off-season under Coach Joe Connolly, one of the nation's best strength and conditioning coaches. And, you know, I was standing near the sideline on Saturday, and, you know, a lot of these guys, some of the star players came over, and I was overhearing some conversations about, like, how exhausted they are. I mean, they're practicing for a little over 2 hours each session, and they're fitting like 22, 23 different practice periods. I mean, there's a sharpness and an efficiency to what they're doing out there. There's not a whole lot of standing around like there was perhaps under the previous regime. And that's kind of one of the things that they did in terms of structuring this spring the way they did, in terms of like not having a defined first team or a second team. They, you know, divided the team into what they call maroon and gold. And so there's not necessarily depth charts as of right now. They're throwing a bunch of guys in a lot of different situations so they can maximize the amount of reps they can do with who's on the field. They're utilizing both of the fields out there at the Kajikawa facility. And a lot of work is getting done. The first two practices were just, of course, by NCAA mandate, just kind of, you know, jerseys, shorts, and helmets. Saturday they went in shells, so they're awarded shoulder pads as well. So they're kind of, you know, ramping things up as they always do in spring, due to the NCAA rules. So it's one of the things that Kenny called out at the end of the first week, is that he'd like to see the physicality get better. He was not pleased with where it is. He wants some sharpness, and he feels that there's a way to thread the needle in terms of being able to have that physicality, but also, you know, not be reckless in terms of risking any further injuries. Just kind of, you know, going by practice, and some of the guys that have been really standing out. Now, we'll probably talk about the quarterbacks here collectively at the end, but, you know, the offense really stole the day in the first practice, which is kind of a little different because I think Joe, early in camp, typically the defense usually wins the days a little bit. They always seem to be a little bit ahead, but the big star for the first practice was wide receiver Xavier Guillory, the Idaho State transfer. He won multiple one-on-ones in each of those kind of main event sessions I alluded to earlier. Scored long touchdowns. One of them, he even after he caught the ball and was racing to the end zone he kind of turned around, did the piece, the Tyreek Hill cheetah thing. Absolutely looks the part. Great speed. Messiah Swinson is looking good. He had a great one-handed sideline catch along the sidelines. Bennett Meredith was really sharp as well. Battling perhaps a forgotten man in that quarterback competition. BJ Green was kind of most notably on the defense, and granted, again without pads, was working on the outside. And Travion Brown has been the vocal leader on that defense. But early on, the offense was getting going. Didn't exactly stay that way in day two. The defense won the day. The coverage was really good. Ed Woods and Ro Torrance had some really good days. One thing that really jumped out to me is the 5-star transfer from Oklahoma, Clayton Smith, just looks the part of a prototypical edge rusher. Looks really good. There were some big things from the offense in terms of the wide receivers. Gio Sanders looked really good. Looks like he's elevated his route running game. Chad Johnson Jr. I think all week has been pretty solid. Had a couple of good sideline catches. But Melquan Stovall, the 5'9" slot receiver from Colorado State, put together a really good second practice. I think he was kind of maybe the star of that second session. But overall, I just kind of had some balance there. In practice 3, kind of the defense was a little bit ahead. The offense had some success with the inside run. Trenton Bourguet was very, very sharp in a 7-on-7 session that I saw. Completed every single pass. Like, he is a guy that was in command. His foot is still coming back. He's still not fully cleared for everything, although he does feel they should be able to be a full participant this upcoming week. But overall, it's been kind of what you like to. Some of the newcomers are really kind of popping off the page. Some of the returning guys like Conyers, Bourguet, Badger are just kind of continuing to do their thing, and we'll see how things ramp up in the coming weeks once the physicality starts ramping up as well.
Yeah, really encouraging to hear good things about the receivers. You look at like the last 2 years, you've either had concerns or disappointing play from the receivers. That's pretty much last year you didn't know what was happening if Badger would be the guy. He played well, very, very well. So did Gio Sanders. Previous year, you had some returning players that you just weren't sure what you're going to get out of them. So the wide receiver position just had question marks the last few years. So if that's a point of strength, and if the tight ends can give you that as well from a few different guys, the pass catchers, if you will, that's real good right there while they shuffle things out at quarterback and figure if you're going to be continuing on with Trent Bourguet or if one of the new guys is going to take the reins for the season. So, as far as the early returns offensively, you like to be able to see that firepower, especially out of some of the transfers, so that that they're, as good as advertised or somewhere in that universe, because they're certainly going to be relying on a lot of them. So you can't have these ones taking a lot of time to catch up with things, especially given the fact, of course, that they're here for the spring. So, again, tiny sample. So far, so good in some respects.
Yeah, so let's cap it with the quarterback talk. And, again, there's no first or second team. There's they've structured it so to kind of give maximum reps to as many guys as possible. Now, we should say that Jaden Rashada, obviously the high-profile quarterback edition, he's done a lot of just kind of sitting back and watching. He's arrived in Tempe relatively recently. Obviously, there's a big learning curve there. But when he has been out there, he's got a real live arm. You can tell that arm talent is there. But he's just been doing a lot of watching some of the older guys like Drew Pine, Trenton Bourguet, even Bennett Meredith. He's the guy who actually in that first practice ASU has done after the stretch has done kind of a team tempo period. Bennett Meredith was actually the first quarterback out there, and he's looked pretty sharp. Especially probably had his best day on the first day. Next couple days, but I had some solid moments as well. I mentioned that Bourguet, you just see he's a guy in control. He knows what he's doing, making some good throws, good reads. This is an offense that gives the quarterback an outlet. In terms of if the read's not there, if the pressure's coming in, they know they have a hot read that they on almost every play that they can make. Drew Pine to me has I think he had a better early part of the week. On Saturday, there was a lot of throws. He took the reins after Bourget in that 7-on-7 session I mentioned, and after Bourget just was completed 100%. The first couple throws from Pine were kind of skipped off the turf or are way low. So he had some accuracy issues. Jake Conover is I think coming along a little bit, but probably the least consistent of the group so far this past week. But again, just 1 week and a long way to go, and we'll see if Jaden Rashada is able to kind of do more as the weeks progress. If Trenton Bourget is finally cleared to be able to do some more teamwork or in the full 11-on-11 team sessions as well. Obviously, that's going to be the big storyline to track. But there's been some promising things. But again, I had a few people tweet at me how's the race shaping up after the first couple practices? I mean, it's way too early, and I mean, just from what we can see, some of the guys and some of the things that you'd expect, kind of given where things are in spring, of just Bourget being a guy in control, making things kind of look smooth and easy. You see Pine, who I think is had a pretty good showing in one team session with his mobility of all things. But yeah, just those quarterbacks, I think the second and third week and each of these next couple of weeks are leading to the spring game. The Saturday practice will act as a scrimmage, so we hopefully will get some more in-depth and detailed data points to work from there.
Yeah, I'd say in general it seems like a safe bet for those of y'all listening not to expect anything too conclusive about the quarterback position throughout the entirety of the spring. It just personally would kind of shock me if you have anything, again, very conclusive prior to fall camp. Again, it might have things trending in a particular way. It might be somewhat predictable, perhaps, or it might be a bunch of chaos. But, expecting after just a few practices for there to be major standouts. If anything, I think that would be a bad thing because they're, some evenly matched guys here in a lot of respect. If someone is out of the competition or if someone's separating himself from the competition, it's probably going to be more of a result of guys looking unexpectedly bad than unexpectedly good. So it's not necessarily a bad thing if this QB, power ranking is TBD even through the duration and after spring ball.
Yeah, I asked Kenny at a media session on the Monday before spring practice opened up, what kind of benchmarks did he have, or if there's any kind of desired waypoints that he wants to be in terms of the quarterback race when spring wraps up. And he was kind of open, saying that there wasn't anything specific. He's going to kind of let things play out. One thing he did not want, though, is he doesn't think that you can really get an accurate read heading into fall camp if there's 4 guys. He also would say, hey, if one guy just comes out there over spring and is like the guy, I won't be afraid to name him. But that's certainly not the expectation. If they can get it down to 2 or 3 guys that are through the spring into summer, and again, you think back to that 2012 season, guy that was kind of trailing the pack after spring. Had a really great summer, and kind of that's where he won the job heading into fall camp. The story of Taylor Kelly is known to all of you. So a lot of things can happen, but in general, it's going to be a week ahead that I think is the team's going to look to ramp up the physicality. Hopefully we'll see some more out of the both lines as things kind of ramp up a little bit. We'd like to see some of the edge rushers get their thing going on a little bit. You mentioned Clayton Smith and company kind of looking the part, but we'll like to see them a little bit in action as things go on.
One season comes to a close. Another is getting the key parts of the preseason getting started up here, so quite a bit to discuss. So for appearance number 89, our guy, devilsdigest.com, Hod Rabino. Hod, welcome back aboard, my man.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, Hod, let's start with football. And obviously you've been covering this program for a number of years. One of the things that obviously jumped out to me first and foremost, just kind of the vibe and energy around these first 3 spring practices. How does that feel and that vibe that you've seen through this first week of spring kind of compare to the other regimes that you've been around in your time covering ASU?
Yeah, you definitely hit the nail on the head about the vibe and energy, Brad, but also say there is some structure. It's not like it's organized chaos out there. It's not like the enthusiasm of the coaches and the players causes a lot of things to be disorganized and out of sorts. And I think I've said this, since Kenny Dillingham got hired, that you can definitely see the Todd Graham influence on him. Now, I think that unlike Todd Graham, Kenny really knows which buttons to push and which buttons to leave alone. So when he talks about the work hard and still have fun, maybe that's the equilibrium that Todd Graham was trying to achieve and didn't always achieve, definitely not at the end of his tenure. But Kenny Dillingham, really from the get-go, is able to really walk that fine line. So I think, yes, there's definitely a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm. But if Dillingham, for example, doesn't like that players are not jogging from one segment to another, or just not taking the field with the sense of urgency he wants them to take the field, he will definitely call him out on that. So I feel that, again, when you're just talking about really trying to have a very high-spirited practice, but also be uncompromising on some fundamentals that you want to entrench on this team, I think Dillingham is doing a good job so far in spring practice.
Now, the quarterbacks are obviously the big major storyline throughout the spring, probably through the summer and early fall as well. But of course, with the way ASU is structuring the spring practices with no true first, second team, so to speak, a little bit harder to get a feel of the pecking order. Just through these first three practices, how do you feel that these quarterbacks have looked to you?
Well, I think that the two veterans, Trent Bourget and Drew Pine, the transfer from Notre Dame, definitely are playing like veterans out there. Trent Bourget told us after Saturday's practice that he's hoping that this week he will throw in team segments, so we would have maybe somewhat of a more valid measuring stick, because he's the only quarterback that has not participated in team segments. But I thought him and Drew Pine may have looked the most consistent ones throughout the first three practices. I think as an offense, it definitely did not perform as well on Thursday and Saturday as it did on Tuesday. But I just feel when it comes to signal callers that have been consistent, I think those two really stood out. I would say in Tuesday's practice, which was the first one of spring, I was really impressed with Bennett Meredith. And I think when you talk about the quarterback race for the starting position, he was definitely considered, I would say, the forgotten man. But Bennett Meredith really impressed a lot on Tuesday. Again, going back to my earlier point, the offense as a whole, Thursday and Saturday, did not play all that well. And some of Meredith did show that in this performance. But if you're just going by that Tuesday practice, I feel that he's maybe somebody that you have to consider. I don't know, maybe so much of a starting job, but really contending for the backup job so far, as early as it is. I think he's definitely shown that. Yeah, Jaden Rashada wasn't getting all that many reps, especially on Tuesday and most of Thursday in the team segments in the 7-on-7. Just wanting him to really absorb the playbook as much as possible. I mean, don't forget that even though he's practicing in the spring, he didn't arrive to campus more than a week and a half before spring started. So he's somewhat in catch-up mode. But I would say in limited action, I think we're seeing definitely some of those flashes that you would expect a four-star quarterback out of high school to show. I'm just really curious to see if they were going to see that progression from week 1 to week 5 with Jaden Rashada, and how much he can be a factor in this race for the starting quarterback position. I mean, I said in the beginning before spring that I'll be shocked if he was the starter or maybe even the backup, just because he has those veterans ahead of him. But nonetheless, I think it's really important for him to show really marked improvement from the beginning until the end of spring to really justify all the hype that he did come with. Jacob Conover, if I had to look at all the quarterbacks one by one, maybe not having that many flashes of brilliance compared to the other four signal callers that I mentioned. He's a transfer from BYU, as everybody knows, but really played scarcely with the Cougars. So I'm not saying that he's coming here almost as a true freshman, but in some respects, really just not having a lot of game experience under his belt, as it would show with guys like Bourget and like Pine. So I'm really curious to see if week 2 of spring is a whole lot different for Conover, because I really think he would need that.
Now, outside of the quarterbacks, there's a lot of other position battles going on and guys vying for to get noticed by this new staff and find places in these new schemes. Other than those quarterbacks, which players jumped out to you most during this first week on both sides of the ball?
Well, I mean, if I look at running back, I think that Cam Skidabo from Sacramento State definitely, I think came as advertised as that low center of gravity, bowling ball type of running back. But at the same time, Brad, I really felt that he showed maybe more athleticism than maybe the film displayed, or maybe just thought about a guy with his measurables in general. So I think that him and Tevin White definitely going to have that battle. For the starting position. But again, maybe unlike the last several years, we actually get to see that 1A pecking order at running back rather than a more established workhorse starter that's really going to take the bulk of carries. I also have to mention George Hart. I mean, I always felt that, he was somewhat the forgotten man last couple of years at running back just because there was so much talent ahead of him. And not that I don't think there's good talent ahead of him in 2023, but nonetheless, I felt George Hart, especially on Saturday, was definitely one of the standouts on offense. At wide receiver, I mean, we're going to get with the guy with Elijah Badger, and he has been playing well for the most part. But I would say Idaho transfer Xavier Gilroy, and even more so Melquan Stovall, the transfer from Colorado State, who I think maybe out of all the quarterbacks has been the most consistent from practice 1 through practice 3. Have really stood out to me. So those two, along with Elijah Badger, pretty much consistently have been running with the first group. Sure, it's spring practice. The grouping and the pecking order can be very fluid, but those are definitely guys that definitely stood out to me. When you look when we look at the defensive line, I really like what Robbie Harrison, who I know is a returning player, is playing over there in the interior line. I think really showing a lot of promising signs. Clayton Smith, who was a 5-star prospect out of high school, who came to ASU via Oklahoma, is definitely as one of the edge players. I think really standing out of us so far. BJ Green, who played 3-tech interior line for his first couple of years at Arizona State, is now playing more on the edge, and I think that may be a role that's more suited for him, just because he's not the biggest lineman out there. We look at linebacker, Trevion Braun, the transfer from Washington State, just by virtue of being somebody who played under defensive coordinator Brian Ward and linebackers coach A.J. Cooper, really having the smoothest transition as you would expect out of any of the players on that side of the ball to a new scheme, really showcasing himself as a leader, and together with Phil Schaefer, to me, are a very, very formidable starting tandem of linebackers. When you look at the safeties, I think it's really just all about the transfers. Shamari Simmons from Austin Peay and Xavier Alford from USC. I wouldn't be surprised at all if come season opener, those are going to be your two starting safeties. I think they just really have embraced this 4-2-5 scheme from their safety vantage point. And I really been impressed with what I saw. A guy like Alford, you probably expect that maybe more than Simmons, a guy coming from an FCS school. But nonetheless, those guys are definitely looking like some of the better transfers that have joined the Sun Devils this season.
So you mentioned a lot of guys that are standing out or have the potential to do so. Now, whether it's an individual player or players, position groups, or other elements about the team, from what you're saying, what do you think the biggest items to work on throughout the remainder of spring camp are?
Well, I mean, I'm sure, Joe, that you guys talked about it, and I think I talked about it too when we had the spring preview. It's definitely the interior of the defensive line. Now, you have a lot of bodies that really need to be sorted out, and as I mentioned, I believe last time I was on with you guys, who knows if the May transfer portal doesn't ultimately produce your two starters at nose tackle and the 3-tech. So even though we've seen some, flashes, here and there of players, CJ Fight, the incoming freshman, I probably should mention him as another guy that is standing out on defense. But nonetheless, I think that's still one area that I don't think we're getting a whole lot of answers right now. A whole lot of players are just really, jumping off the page at you as being formidable starters at a Pac-12 level. So that's definitely one position to look at. And, with the running backs, I mean, I'm not saying there's really area of concerns. I mean, I mentioned Cam Scatterbo that is playing well. Tevin White, the redshirt freshman, who showed very little flashes last year, but definitely a lot of potential. I think is playing well. So you'd like to see those players just step it up. So I don't know if I would put the level of concern at running back equivalent to the level of concern in interior defensive line, but I would say on offense, if there's any question mark in my mind that stands right now, would be the running back position.
So as spring camp's underway, seeing quite a bit on social media of recruits on unofficial visits, that sort of thing, coming out to practices, a lot of photo sessions, all that good stuff. As we're turning the page here, I mean, obviously the 2023 team will still be constructed via the transfer portal, but as the major high school recruiting efforts turn to 2024, what are you seeing and hearing there, and kind of what's your early evaluation of what this staff is doing for its first real full cycle of recruiting?
Yeah, I just think that the staff has definitely not be shy to invite recruits pretty much every practice, whether it's a weekday or a weekend, and then definitely making a strong effort to show as much love as possible. If you recall, there is a window in June, for official visits. So maybe it's good to bring a lot of those recruits on campus for an unofficial visit in March, April, and maybe around, if you will, for a possible official visit in June. Granted, the weather is not the greatest that time of the year, as we all know, and maybe you prefer for some recruits to come in the fall anyway, experiencing game day with a lot of attractive games on the schedule. That's something that can be a huge benefit. But I just feel that ASU is casting their net really, really wide, not really being that discriminating in who they invite, whether it's local players, out-of-state players, 24 guys, 25 guys, even 26 guys. So I really, really do like the approach of just being very, very inclusive, for lack of a better term. And obviously, as we all know, and I did the interview with him, it's on my front page at devilsdigest.com, Colin Simmons, not only the top 2024 recruit in the state of Texas, but also the top edge prospect and in the entire class, number 3 overall in the class, regardless of position, was at Arizona State, and definitely gave a lot of positive feedback when I did talk to him on the phone. Don't get me wrong. I mean, ASU is up against all the powerhouses of the SEC to get that guy, including Texas, who's soon to be joining the SEC. But just to have a guy come in this early in the recruiting cycle and really have a lot of positive aspects. I don't know if he really came with low expectations about Arizona State and the visit itself, but definitely came away really, really impressed. That's definitely a feather in your cap, because I don't even know if the previous coaching staff would able to bring guys that are like bona fide blue chippers, top 5, in his case, the top prospects in the state of Texas. So that's definitely a positive sign. Sure, a successful season in the fall can really do even more wonders for your recruiting class. But right now, I just feel that both the quantity and the quality of prospects that are showing interest in Arizona State, that are actually showing up on campus for unofficial visits, is pretty damn impressive, especially for a first-year staff.
All right, let's turn the page over to the basketball, and of course the heartbreaking finish the other night in the tournament game. But overall, you take a step back, you see 23 wins, one in the tournament, a big win over U of A, of course. When you compare what you saw through this season to your preseason expectations, how did this year for Sun Devil Hoops stack up?
Yeah, for me, it wasn't really a surprise or disappointment, because I picked them to finish 4th, and with tiebreakers and everything, they dropped from 5th to 6th. But I also predicted them to squeak into the NCAA tournament, and they did that with that first 4 game in Dayton. So to me, everything really did more or less go to plan. Did I expect such a hot start to be followed by such a valley? For lack of a better term, no, I probably did not expect that to happen. But I felt in the preseason, and maybe even I went on your show and said that I felt that for Bobby Hurley, this definitely was the most talented and the deepest team that he had in his tenure. And the way they started out the season at 15-3, I think definitely proved that theory quite right. And at the end, when their back was really against the wall, when they needed to go against U of A and Tucson and really win a game over there, miracle shot or not, just to go and keep their NCAA tournament, hopes alive. I mean, everybody talks about the miracle shot, Brad, but I mean, I don't know how many teams and you can look throughout the history books that come into McKale Center and drop over 80 points on U of A on their home court. That really doesn't happen a lot, and that's just really a tribute, I think, to Bobby Hurley and the staff that was able to really just instill that sense of urgency and determination in their team, and they were able to win that game. Obviously, winning 2 games in the Pac-12 tournament, the second one against USC, which I think really just clinched that NCAA tournament berth for them. That definitely was impressive too. Overall, and I did say it with a very passionate conversation I had with Kyle Dodd on Sunday night, and you can catch that on the YouTube channel of Devil's Digest. I said, for all the folks that are Bobby Hurley detractors that really want to see him gone, whether he doesn't get an extension or doesn't get an extension, that the fact that, you are rightfully so blaming him for the 2 very lean years that preceded this season, I think at the same token, you have to give Bobby Hurley and the staff credit from bringing this program up from a pretty dark place, especially for 2 years ago, to what they did this year with 23 wins, winning an NCAA tournament game. I'm not saying this is unprecedented heights. I'm not saying this is a season to absolutely remember forever and forever, even with that great win at U of A. But ultimately, you want to see progress. Ultimately, this is what have you done for me lately, sports world. And if you're judging Bobby Hurley by the here and now, I think he's somebody who definitely did a good job with Arizona State. And as I've been very vocal in my opinion on social media and in interviews, I think he does deserve the extension. And that's really going to determine everything about the future of ASU basketball, whether or not he gets that extension, whether or not he stays in Tempe.
No, yeah, let's end on that last question. Obviously, very fluid situation, a lot of factors at play, and we'll timestamp it. As we record this on Monday night, so a lot of things can happen. But as of right now, what is your sense? True or false? Bobby Hurley is ASU's head coach at the start of next season.
I am cautiously pessimistic, Brad, and maybe that's not a term that you hear a lot, but I just have a sinking feeling that the conversation between him and Ray Anderson is not going to be fruitful in the sense that's going to have Bobby Hurley stay here. And look, there's like 10,000 different scenarios that can happen over here. Ray Anderson may or may not offer an extension to Bobby Hurley. When he does offer an extension, maybe it does come with some kind of stipulations of hiring, more assistant coaches. There's actually an NCAA rule that did pass a couple months ago that does allow you to have not 3, but 5 assistants on the bench. Now, granted, only 3 of them can be on the road recruiting, but nonetheless, it's an opportunity to really beef up your staff, which I think on paper can really can contribute to better success. Then he can also have the scenario where Ray Anderson tells Bobby Hurley, hey, you know what? You have 1 more year on the contract. Why don't you go ahead and prove in 23-24 that you can, again, achieve a 20-win season, again, can qualify for the NCAA tournament, and then we can talk extension. And then you have Bobby Hurley on the other side of the equation. Does he accept whatever decision Ray Anderson is really going to render about giving an extension, not giving an extension, giving an extension with stipulations? That's really anybody's guess. I think Bobby Hurley, and rightfully so, should really demand, I would say, more support financial-wise from Anderson in the basketball program. Just today, John Canzano from they used to write for the Oregonian, does a great job covering Pac-12, did have a graphic out there that out of the 10 public schools in the Pac-12, ASU is just dead in the middle of the pack in terms of their dollar amount supporting basketball. Now, sure, it's a dollar amount that did get affected by COVID, because I know for a fact that before COVID, the budget for basketball was much higher up there in the pecking order among their Pac-12 brethren. But nonetheless, I mean, that budget really needs to grow up. To grow further, I'm sorry. So now ASU is not taking only a handful of charter flights during the season. So now even the Weather Up Center, if there's some carpet or furniture that needs to be replaced or be repaired, or any machinery that needs to be repaired over there or be updated, I should say, that really does take place. I mean, you also got Desert Financial Arena and University President Michael Crow making, I think, what it was a miserable statement that it's functional, nothing's wrong with it. A better arena doesn't help you win games. And I just feel that, Bobby Hurley has a lot of, let's say, crap to deal with. I don't know. I don't want to get in FCC trouble over here if it applies to podcast or not, but there really is a lot of obstacles that have been placed in his way. And I think when you see him succeed despite all that, at a place that may not be all that attractive to recruits just because of the facilities themselves, I think you really have to really tip your hat to Bobby Hurley. I'm not saying he can't grow this program even more. I'm not saying that he shouldn't grow this team more. But there's just been, it seems like, one obstacle after another standing in his way. So I'm hoping, again, that the conversation with him and Ray Anderson on the extension, on what they want to see from each other moving forward when it comes to the basketball program, as far as support, as far as some structural staff changes, that is a fruitful conversation. But again, if you ask for honest opinion, Brad, and that's why I'm on your podcast right now, I am cautiously pessimistic that it's not going to work. And I don't feel that Bobby Hurley is going to be the head coach in for the 23-24 season. I'll be glad to be wrong because, again, I think that he's done a great job over here. I'm just questioning the support from the leadership of the athletic department. So that, to me, is really going to be the absolute determining element in the future of Bobby Hurley and ASU basketball.
Well, Hod, as always, we appreciate you, my man. Don't go too far. I get the feeling we're probably going to be talking to you here in the near future as well with so much going on. But for the time being, thanks as always, my man.
No problem, guys. If there's an emergency podcast going on, you know where to find me.
Before we sign off, I'm going to bring you the conversation that we had with ASU quarterback Jaden Rashada, who finally spoke to the media for the first time in quite a while after ASU's Saturday practice.
Jade, when did you arrive, and what's the process been like learning the offense?
Yeah. Shoot, my first day was Monday spring ball, so, I kind of got thrown in there, but, it helped me more, because you're just sitting back learning everything and watching, not in a rush to go out and put out something that it's not a clean rep. So I would say that's been helping me the most.
So what's the process like when you're kind of trying to learn it?
Yeah.
Other guys have already been doing walkthroughs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to learn it. So it's nothing impossible, so I just been enjoying the process, it won't come overnight. So just staying patient and just grateful to be here.
How do you feel like your skill set fits into what Dillingham wants to do from the quarterback position?
So I feel like it fits pretty well, just off showcasing the quarterback, to be honest, and trusting coach and coach trusting the quarterback. I think my skill set would fit pretty well.
How's it feel to be repping the maroon and gold, just like your dad?
Oh, nothing like it. And I really didn't notice that till I got here, first day of spring ball, I just rode to campus on my bike and was just couldn't stop smiling. But man, I'm just grateful to be in a healthy, good situation. I'm glad to be here.
How do you feel like the rest of the program has really kind of, brought you in and kind of got you going through the acclimation process?
Yeah, no, we got a team. Nobody has an ego here. Everybody's just trying to win, and get each other better. So it's one of my favorite parts about being here.
I know on signing day, Kenny talked about the long-time relationship he has with you when he recruited you at other stops. Mm-hmm. He said sometimes, maybe guys would more disagree than agree, but here you are. Just talk about that relationship. How important was it to make your decision to come here?
Shoot, in my opinion, relationships are everything in life. So, we just kept building. I would, ask him even when I was committed elsewhere, just on his opinion and outlooks on some things, and he would always answer him. It was never, he always had my best interest, whether it was in his favor or not. So I think, life works in a full circle. So when I had the opportunity, we kind of both knew what it was.
How's your dad feeling now?
My dad feels great. Yeah, dad feels great.
What you guys talk about just kind of, kind of taking on the mantle of him being a Sun Devil and all that stuff too?
Yeah, he had the time of his life here, playing football. So, I was definitely hearing that, and now I know what he means, just off my first week here. But it's been such a blessing, just being in a healthy environment, good weather, good coaching, good teammates, good support staff. Just you got everything you need here.
So you got 4 more weeks of spring practice. What are your goals for those weeks?
My goals are just to learn, keep learning the offense, keep getting myself better every day. Never take steps back. You can't go forward looking in the rear view. So just keep growing mentally.
What's it like to be part of a quarterback group that has several older veteran guys?
Yeah, no, it feels good because you ask a question, they'll answer it. So a lot of them, they know what they're talking about, just off experience, and we definitely, they definitely have been helping me a lot too.
Jay, you got the long ball, but what are some of the details that you some of the coaches have told you to look out for in the first couple of days of practice, and some of the things that you've picked up quickly?
Yeah, just I say my feet work. Like going to this level of football, it starts to become more of the little details. So I just been trying to fix my feet work, and go ahead.
What do you think about Coach? The pace of everything and just mixing it up.
Yeah.
And mixing up, obviously working with different groups, but just like the pace of practice, how does that suit you?
No, high tempo, like offense has to play fast, so that's definitely going to work in our favor when it comes to playing games.
How's it feel to be able to just focus on football after kind of the whirlwind of the last few months?
Nothing like it. So, that's why it's been such a big blessing. That's why I keep saying I'm just grateful to be here because, you learn, you live and you learn, so it's definitely such a big blessing just coming here, focusing on football, and me as a student and life in general. I feel like I definitely grew as a person in 5 days, so yeah.
How do you feel like your past experiences have prepared you for this moment here at ASU?
Yeah, because nobody knows how it feels to live your shoes, so past experiences, made me nothing but stronger, changed my outlook on perspectives of things and where your focus is, but yeah, you live and you learn, become a stronger man, and I wouldn't change my journey for anything.
And you said that ASU is like home for you. Why is it like home, and what drew you here?
Shoot, I just always grew up around here, just coming to these games and stuff when I was a kid. My first college game ever was an ASU game, so, just little things like that, just being familiar with the area, and yeah.
Were there any former ASU players that you looked up to when you were younger?
Yeah, shoot, Jalen, I was, when I was growing up, I was me watching Jalen Strong, Manny Wilkins, DJ Foster, all those dudes were dudes I was always familiar with, and yeah.
What's it like having DJ out here his first year back on staff?
Yeah.
What's it been like working with him so far?
Yeah, DJ, he actually doesn't get the credit he deserves, but he helps us players out a lot, as far as just molding you, knowing where to go, how you carry yourselves, and all that. DJ, I know me personally, he's helped me out, one of the most than anybody, most people here, just as far as a student athlete, not just as an athlete, student athlete, as a person.
How do you approach this competition coming up in the quarterback room? This is kind of the second year it's been a battle with a couple guys. How are you going to approach it?
Sure, I'm just going to learn from everybody, including myself. But really, I'm just going to learn off everybody, and just try to get better every day. Keep asking questions, and just learn off these dudes who've been doing it.
How has the adjustment been, at ASU and at the college level so far for you?
Yeah, everything's been well. Just a big jump, as far as the X's and O's and the play calling and trying to learn the playbook and stuff. But it's definitely been going well so far. But I'd say that's the biggest jump.
Do you have any lessons, some of the biggest ones that you've learned so far?
You just learn something new every day. So, nothing specific, but just learn something new every day.
For fans who haven't seen you play, how would you describe your game and your style?
I can't describe it. You guys will hopefully see one day.
What are your expectations for this first year?
Just everybody getting better and, to win. Not saying any expectations, but, we're trying to become, Pac-12 champions. So that's how we practice and approach lifts and practices and film sessions, that we're trying to win the Pac-12.
How did Kenny and the staff kind of sell you on the potential of the program, obviously coming off of a rough year a season ago, but just, the future of Sun Devil football?
Yeah, they didn't really sell us on anything, it was just more so, just believing in each other, really, just believing in each other, and the standard they set here is pretty big. So, yeah.
Do you have any personal goals? Do you have any personal goals this season for you?
No, just get 1% better every day. Be a better version of yourself on and off the field than you were yesterday. That's really my goals this year.
Anybody in particular you're getting pretty close with out there on the field yet?
Shoot, I'm just every day just trying to get closer to everybody, but yeah.
Have you gotten in on chess or spades with Coach Kenny at all?
No. I'm gonna practice a little more before I do that.
Jay, do you remember the first time you met Kenny? What your initial impressions of him were?
Yeah, that was actually back in my recruiting process before he even announced the job at Oregon. That was like when he announced the job at Oregon. He reached out to me, and our relationship just grew from there. We were talking every other day, just building a genuine relationship. And I was actually gonna commit to Oregon, and he actually, because of him, and he was like, just take your visits, take your time. Like it was never like just him rushing anything. He just always, gave me the real of everything, and that's probably why I ended up here.
He's almost like a mentor to you.
Yeah, just always, kept it, as solid as he can. It always, helped me a lot.
And why was this offense specifically the right fit for you?
I think, that just what he does, as far as showcasing the quarterback, trusting the quarterback, and the quarterback trusting him. I think that's one of the biggest things.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. I'd like to thank our great guest, Hod Rabino, on the brink of his 90th appearance all time. Now, of course, with spring ball going fast and furious and perhaps some basketball news coming down the pike, Joe and I will be, of course, in your podcast feeds. And also make sure you stay with us on social media. You can follow the show on Twitter at SOTD Podcast, on Instagram at Speak of the Devils. You can find us on Facebook and give me a follow on Twitter and Instagram at BDenny29.
And you can follow me at Joe Healy42. Huge shout out to our sponsors, as always, DeFalco's Deli, Cactus Sports, Devil's Digest, Jones Auto Group, Spaghetti Shack, and Sun Devil Family Charities.
And once you're done supporting our amazing sponsors, make sure you drop us a 5-star review. We're closing in on almost 200 reviews on Apple specifically, so if we can get there, that'd be pretty cool. Joe and I will be back soon. We'll be breaking down what has been happening in spring ball, and of course, ASU's got Pro Day coming up. We'll preview those Pro Devils.